Good morning, everybody. I am thrilled to be here with you again this morning. Those of you in the archive version, we're happy that you're able to have the opportunity to listen to Kenowa Hills, Jerry Hopkins, and Mike Burde talk to us about their competency-based education model and what they're doing down there. So to get started, I want to certainly remind everybody that we're recording. Lisa Sitkins is helping me. She's an EdTech specialist. I'm Marcia Miles. And we want to encourage people to jump in with questions through the chat. And we can also, you can ask a question. Maybe Mike and Jerry, occasionally, you might just see if people have questions if they're not in the chat, just kind of give them the chance to do that by voice for a little back and forth that way. So please feel free to be a participant. We want this to be not only a presentation, but a conversation. So I'm really looking forward to this because I've gotten to know Mike and Jerry over the last few months and learning more and more about the journey that they've been on. And next year sounds like it's going to be a real big year in Kenowa Hills for all the work that they've done. Things are going to kind of start to really come to fruition, and that's very exciting. I'm sure it's kind of scary too, but it's very, very exciting. So it is my pleasure to introduce both Jerry Hopkins, the superintendent at Kenowa Hills, and Mike Burde, the assistant superintendent at Kenowa Hills. So Lisa, if you want to transition over to Mike, and Jerry, I will let you two pick it up from there. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We are hopefully on the screen now. Wanted to thank Marcia and her team for allowing us this opportunity to tell our story this morning. And the title of our story, we came up with early implementation steps in transitioning to a personal mastery system of education. And really, it's a story about a journey we've been on now for about 3 years in second order change. And as you all know, second order change is heavy lifting. It's changing paradigms, changing the way people think and behave, and it's been quite a journey thus far, and we're anxious to tell a little bit about it this morning and certainly preserve some time for questions at the end. But before we got started, just wanted to go over a little bit of what we wanted to share this morning. We'll tell you a little bit about myself and Jerry. Jerry's going to talk about kind of our background story, our vision building, and creating a culture that supports change, and our vision that we develop collaboratively. And then I'll jump into some of the nuts and bolts that really surrounds Marzano's high reliability schools framework. And at the end, we've kind of got a food for thought section where we'll maybe share some hot topics that we've encountered over the past few years that could hopefully support some districts as they think about this work. So that's a quick overview of our plans for today. But before we get started, just wanted to tell you a little bit about me. In my interest, on the screen, you'll see my two children, Catherine and Marilyn. Catherine's my oldest. She's 7. Marilyn will be 5 this weekend, and my interests are certainly my family. We like playing on the water in the summer. At the bottom of that screen, you'll see we like cooking, and if you saw me, you'd really understand we like cooking. And obviously, my passion are students, families, and definitely public education. I'm real passionate about public education and where we're headed as a community.
And a little bit about me. Again, I'm Jerry Hopkins, superintendent here at Kenowa Hills. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know this is an especially busy time of year as we wrap up another school year, and being part of this webinar means a lot to us, and we learn a lot from this as well. So a little bit about me. Obviously, family is important to me as well. You can see a few pictures of my family. My oldest, Sophia, is a freshman this year, and my son, my only son, is an 8th grader, and then my youngest is a 4th grader. And as you can see, they enjoy a lot of outdoor things based on the pictures there as well. I always get a little uncomfortable talking a little bit about myself, so I actually asked my children to give me a little, what would they say about Dad? And believe it or not, my 4th grader is the one who came up with philanthropist. And I said, where in the world did you come up with that? and it was a conversation they were having at school, quite honestly. So I want to get in contact with her teacher to talk about the wonderful conversations they're having in school. But this was more about a conversation that she overheard my wife and I having regarding, giving to others, and we've been very blessed and know that there are others who aren't, and so we make it part of our family practice to give to others as much as possible, and it's clearly having an impression upon our children, but it's also a reminder to all of us that our children do listen to what the conversations that we adults are having. So, and then others have said I'm a servant leader as well, and I don't know whether that's entirely true or not, but I do know that I'm frequently not the smartest person in the room and have to rely on a lot more smart people than me, and so maybe that's where some of that comes from. And I picked up a new hobby, so I say I like money, but it's more about coin collecting that I enjoy doing. I figured I needed to do something to keep my mind engaged on things other than what we do every day, and so that's been surrounding coin collecting. That's been a new hobby of mine. So enough about me. A little bit about Kenowa Hills, just so you know where we're located. We're in Kent County, a little bit northwest of Grand Rapids. Smaller district, I believe, although there are smaller, of course. We have about 3,200 students. We reconfigured a few years ago as enrollment declined and economies of scale. We closed a couple of schools, and so reconfigured our district. So we now have one early childhood center, 3 elementary schools, smallest of which is just a 2-section building, about 200 students, the largest of which is about 675 students. We have 1 middle school and 1 high school. We also have a middle college program, partnership that we have with Davenport University, and we have a Pathways program, which is a hybrid program of blended learning as well. And excited to start a virtual learning academy in the upcoming school year, as well as we continue to provide a continuum of pathways for our students. We have about half of our students who are on free or reduced lunch. That's up considerably, as most districts have experienced over the last few years. And we're pretty large geographically compared to other districts as well. 47 square miles, but what I think makes us a little bit more unique is that we are part of 2 counties, Ottawa and Kent County, and that's where we came up with, that's where the name came for Kenowa, is Kent and Ottawa, combination of the 2 counties. We have 3 townships that we represent. And we have 2 cities, largest of which is Walker, and then a little bit of city of Grand Rapids as well. So where this all started, real quickly, just to give you a little bit of background information. When I came in 2011, it was just, as you can imagine, it was a year of just kind of came to Kenowa Hills. It was a year of just studying a lot of things, having lots of conversations with people, and from that realized that, like many other districts, our students, confronting reality, the brutal reality was they were not engaged in the education process, and student achievement was less than what any of us wanted for our students, and part of which was a result of the engagement or lack of engagement for that, as that might be. We have, as a part of our ISD, Kent Area School District, we had conducted a couple years of studies through surveys of our high school students regarding their engagement level, and it was really helpful for us because it gave us an idea of what the level of student engagement was, but it also affirmed some of the things, the observations we were making. So we put a couple bullet points in the presentation regarding some of those responses. 23% of our students look forward to seeing what we do in class every day. That was alarming that it was only less than 1 in 4 students really looked forward to what was happening in class. And only 16% of students found homework and other assignments to be interesting. Probably not a surprise to any of you, but it was just, again, affirming what we thought was the case. And it's the case in a lot of classrooms across this country that students really aren't engaged, and that's something that we wanted to certainly have a role in changing. And then we were looking at our student achievement in addition to what we saw, data-wise as it relates to statewide assessments and so forth. We also were looking at retentions at the elementary level, and then bigger than that, as it might be at the secondary level, what was happening with our students, their lack of success. And I'm embarrassed to have these things out there, but it was confronting reality. after one semester, we found that we had 594 classes that were failed in 6th through 12th grade. So students who had failed classes. That represented 326 students who had failed at least one class. And then beyond that, as if that wasn't alarming enough, we had 1,069 classes where there were where students had earned a D, where we saw that as a significant gap in their learning, and that represented almost 1 in every 3 students that had a D. So it was bad enough that students were failing classes. It was as alarming, or if not more alarming, that there were significant gaps which perpetuated the problem. And that was obviously a significant cost to tax on the district in terms of retention and recovery. So armed with that data, we went back to our teachers and said, looking over this person's right shoulder, if you will, are we going to continue doing the same and get the same results or similar results, or are we going to build a system that aligns with our beliefs and practices? It was very clear. It was affirmation, if you will, as much as we didn't like to see it. It was affirmation that students weren't engaged, they weren't excited about coming to school, and they weren't as successful as what we wanted them to be. But it was not the fault of our teachers, and that's what we've said over and over again. It's the fault of the system not supporting the teachers, not supporting the students to be successful. And this was captured, many of you probably have seen this in circles before, but captured through the cartoon here. So the message we had with our students or with our teachers is, we know that you're working in many cases harder than your students, and you're the ones that are in many cases owning their education, and that's because you care more about their success than they do. And how can we help them care more about their success and what they currently do? And that's what this was all about. What, when, and how were we going to move forward given the information that we had? So we started with, like many of you probably have done before in your districts, having conversations about what do we believe in, what are our values, and what are our vision. And we truly went out and captured that through lots of conversations and feedback from all stakeholders. We had a survey that we put out to our community, and where we of over 10,000 people received the survey and provided input. Not all 10,000 provided input, obviously, but it was put out there. We did a process of an affinity with all of our students, all 3,300 of our students, if you will. Kindergarten through 12th grade participated in the conversations. All of our staff, certified staff, support staff. We had a group of parents. We had at that point, it was our largest attended parent event that was not centered around students, student performances and stuff, where we had parents come in and give us input, and then we had local business officials come in as well. In all cases, we asked 2 questions. What do our students need to be successful in the 21st century? And then if we're not meeting that need, what do we need to change to our existing system to help them be successful? And through that, we developed our mission, vision, and beliefs that you see on the screen here. And that became part of a conversation that we had at our school board level, as you can imagine, who've been right alongside with us through this journey that really helped us get to where we are, and these are parts of our strategic plan. Our vision is to become the most innovative student-centered district in the state. Our mission is to cultivate and graduate globally competitive citizens, and these are 4 of the beliefs that came out of all of the processes that we did through the affinity process. So we want to have quality learning environments. We believe in quality learning environments. We believe in research-based approaches to schooling. We believe in intentionally building relational capacity and continuous improvement for excellence. I don't know if this is a good time to stop and ask if there are any questions, but as Marcia had suggested, it's a lot to digest, and maybe this is a good place to stop and see if there are any questions.
Jerry, we do have a question asking, what type of survey tool did you use when you surveyed all those individuals?
Yeah, well, it was a combination of, we really, when it came to the survey of our parents, the students and so forth, it was really just asking those 2 questions, and then having them, they were using Post-it notes to generate some thoughts, and then we went through a process of collecting all that information and putting it into themes, if you will, and that's the whole affinity process. In terms of our community survey, it was part of a larger, broader scale survey. We contracted the services of a company. I'd have to get you the name of that company that really incorporated a lot of things in that survey, of which were elements surrounding what we were doing with our visioning and beliefs and so forth. So it was it was School Perceptions, I believe, if I'm going from memory, was the name of the company, and they were not a state company that really specializes in gathering survey data and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
And then, so moving forward, so we want to obviously align our vision and our strategy, and through the process that we use, we really came up with the phrase was coined by a subcommittee that we had that was helping us work through the process of bringing our journey to life, and they coined the phrase "journey to excellence," and we've stuck with that. Had a lot of conversations about that as we've gone, but really this has all been has been used by Mike earlier, and we've seen in other settings. It's really been about a journey, and so we like that phrase, our journey to excellence, because it's about improving our system of education, and a group of key stakeholders really defined our journey to excellence as an open and honest learning community that honors student strengths and growth areas while focusing on learning high academic expectations and character development. Again, that was a stakeholder group that really defined J2X as that. Really what it is, boil it down, it is our student-centered performance-based system, moving away from the traditional setting that many of us are very accustomed to a time-based system that really honors the fact that students learn at different rates and different times. Instead of time being the constant, we want learning to be the constant, something that happens all the time, and not acknowledging, recognizing that students learn at different rates at different times. So we put together a little graphic. You might have seen something like this before. All of us are very familiar with a traditional system, very fixed. Students come in, at the same age for the most part as a 5-year-olds, and every year, based on their age, they move to a next grade level. Whether or not they're ready, and oftentimes teachers do the very best they can to accommodate the needs of the students to differentiate their learning, but it's still fixed. It's still based on time. Those 175, 180 days in the school year, and 1,098 hours, and all that kind of stuff. We wanted to move beyond that, and so we're putting a system in place that honors that. We're moving away from textbooks, as a lot of you have been doing. Our curriculum is not designed based on where it's, first chapter in the textbook on day one, and that, first lesson and that kind of thing. Driven instead based on high academic standards and character development. We've really worked hard at developing professional learning communities. We have colleagues that are very envious of our schedule that we have developed, but we've worked with our community a couple of years ago to offer to provide within our schedule. We had early dismissal days, 90 minutes early, several times during I think it was 17 times during the school year we dismissed early on Wednesdays, 90 minutes. So students went home so we could have professional conversations within learning communities about how do we put all these things in place. We've moved to half days, where we have several half days throughout the school year, because we found like our teachers were just getting engaged in conversations, and those 90 minutes went super fast, and we could benefit more from half days. So we have built in our calendar now for the last 2 years several half days where students dismiss midway through the day, and so we can have our professional learning communities have conversations about our second order change and the things that need to be in place associated with that. We're able to do that. I said to our association, these are the things that we need to have happen in order for that to be the case. We have half of our students that receive free or reduced lunch, I don't feel comfortable sending them home that many days without a lunch. So what can we do to make that possible? So we now offer lunch on half days, but do it in a SAC lunch variety. Our teachers help with that process, in that the SAC lunches are delivered to classrooms more than a half hour before the end of the day, so that students that either want to purchase a SAC lunch or receive it free reduced, they get that on the half days. They have it in class as a way to end their day. We do that K through 12, and then we also provide an after-school enrichment on the half days for our families who need childcare in the afternoon. We offer that in each of our elementary buildings for a very reasonable cost to our families for an afternoon of enrichment. So we did that as a way to support our families, knowing that it was a hardship for them as well. And then, of course, focusing on the traditional focus on basic skills, we want to not only focus on basic skills but critical thinking, and we want to prepare learners for their future, not just for college and or their career. And so those are the things that we're moving toward. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike as he continues.
One of the subtle things before I jump to the next slide I like on this one is it's subtle, but we think it's significant. Rather than referring to our to the children in our care as students, we refer to them now as learners. And again, it's subtle, but we think it helps shift that mindset from sage on the stage, knowledge we're imparting to our students, to facilitating learning for our learners. Jumping down to the next slide, we wanted to touch on Marzano's High Reliability Schools framework, which really we think helped provide us a roadmap for how to get to personal mastery or competency-based education. And it really gives us a framework also to do some checking and adjusting for each of our learning communities. And you'll notice there are 5 levels. And the most important level, which is foundational, is having, I believe, a safe and orderly environment. And it culminates on the 5th level with a personal mastery or competency-based system. So what we wanted to do is, you'll see in this slide, there are certain components with each level. We wanted to dive into each of the levels a little bit and just talk about our story and the things we've done within those levels as we try to implement personal mastery system. So the level 1 that you'll see on this slide, safe and orderly environment, one of the keys here is having a shared vision. As Jerry mentioned, we spent literally a year developing a shared vision with our values and beliefs, and really reached out to each and every one of our stakeholders within our school community, and obviously extended out to our families and business partners. We also did extensive training surrounding codes of cooperation. That's a Reinventing Schools Coalition phrase. But our high school at the classroom level developed social contracts, and that was through training with the Flipping Group and Capturing Kids' Hearts. But essentially, it's an agreement for how we're going to treat each other and how we're going to have a successful learning environment. Each and every classroom develops a code of cooperation or a social contract, and it's an agreement. We also spent quite a bit of time in my first year here working with Jerry, developing a decision-making process. We wanted to kind of tip on its side the traditional decision-making process, which, as many of you know, is somewhat top-down in nature, and make it more horizontal. We think when we make decisions that involve several stakeholders, the buy-in, the commitment to the direction that we go is there, as opposed to a top-down model. The other thing you'll see in each and every one of our learning communities are standard operating procedures, SOPs. And this has been used in the business arena for quite some time, but was new to us in the school setting. Again, this is a Reinventing Schools piece, but essentially day-to-day things that happen in the classroom each and every day that potentially take up instructional time. What are some processes we can develop that help create efficiencies in the classroom so we can concentrate on effective instruction and learning? So if you're in our classrooms, you'll see SOPs all over the place that help guide some of those processes. And then the last, I would argue, potentially the most important one in level 1 is relationships and collegiality. We've had, again, pretty extensive training with the Flipping Group with capturing kids' hearts, but we've also engaged in their leadership training series. The first one we did was called Leadership Blueprint, and the second one was Organizational Blueprint. They're both 3-day trainings, and if you haven't worked with the Flipping Group, I highly encourage you to consider it and reaching out to them. They've provided some of the best leadership training that I believe is on planet Earth. They're just wonderful in processes that develop high levels of relational capacity and collegiality in organizations. The second level we wanted to touch on, and this is one, candidly, we had to circle back on. We jumped really from level 1, and I'm going to slide ahead a slide, to level 3. A lot of Marzano's HRS literature came out after we were headed down our pathway towards personal mastery and competency-based ed. So we jumped to guaranteed viable curriculum and realized about 18 months ago we needed to back up to level 2, the slide I'm backing up to now, and really put some pieces in place to make sure we have an effective instructional framework. And after a lot of research and conversations with stakeholders, we realized the gradual release of responsibility instructional framework really aligned nicely with where we were heading with personal mastery. And those are the 4 components of the GRR instructional framework. A lot of these are not new practices, but it's created a common language in our organization, K-12, that we can speak a language and really learn together as we develop our skills in each of these areas. Under effective instructional framework, we've also made, I would say, a pretty significant investment in implementing classroom learning labs. Classroom learning labs really took our professional learning communities to the next level. I'd be happy to talk about any of the attendees about what classroom learning labs are. That could be an entire presentation in itself, but those have really transformed our culture of our organization, I would argue, and we've had just wonderful reviews from our staff this year on that process. Also, an effective instructional framework, obviously, is differentiated instruction and having conversations surrounding flexible grouping processes. Trying to make sure systematically that students are in their zone of proximal development is a conversation we continue to have. Jumping up to level 3, guaranteed viable curriculum. As I mentioned, this is one, we went from level 1 to level 3, back to level 2, but level 3 we spent quite a bit of time on in making sure we had both guaranteed and viable curriculum. One of the pieces of language we use in our district is making sure each and every course and subject area has what's called measurement topics, which are the big ideas that nest within that course, and also learning targets, which are standards essentially that nest under measurement topics, again, for each and every subject and course K-12. We wrapped up that work recently. We have a few tweaks and modifications to make before we go live next year in our LMS, which we'll talk about. But our measurement topics and learning targets are aligned to state standards, and they're really the heart of our curriculum. We've also developed common pre and post assessments that align to our measurement topics. That's, again, a work in progress. We feel like through some of our analyses, assessment is certainly an area we need to grow and improve upon, but each and every measurement topic should have a pre and post assessment for obvious reasons. Last but not least, it's probably worth noting we've made a pretty substantial investment in our curriculum resources in the last 3 to 5 years. And as Jerry mentioned, we've transitioned from a lot of the traditional resources that textbooks and so on to most of our curriculum now are found in online resources, and we continue to move in that direction. We'll talk about it before the end of our slideshow here, but we're a 1-to-1 district in grades 5 through 12 and 1-to-2 in grades K through 4. So again, it makes sense for us to be mindful of where we're heading with technology. Level 4 standards-based reporting. This is our big push next year when we launch our LMS. In our LMS, we'll talk about in a few minutes. It's 360. It's available to our parents, our students, our staff members. It creates that transparency in our curriculum. But beyond that, a big need we've identified in this area is having a district-level grading and assessment handbook. We have a draft of that right now that's getting reviewed actually this evening by our school improvement team. But we hope to have that grading and assessment handbook district-wide in place for next year. Again, with the notion that it brings clarity to our expectations and our beliefs surrounding grading and assessing. Last but not least in this area, I wanted to make sure we noted extended learning opportunities, and it probably doesn't nest under standards-based reporting, but with a mindset that when students fall off pace with their measurement topics and learning targets in the standards-based system, we need to make sure we have guaranteed interventions available to all of our students K-12. So this year we have K-12 extended day opportunities in all of our buildings, and we'll also have K-12 extended year programming available to all of our students. Again, under that same thing, if we're going to hold learning constant, time needs to be a variable. Last but not least, this is where we're headed. This is our vision of having a personal mastery or competency-based system where time is the variable, learning is the constant. In order to make this happen, we think some key components need to be in place, certainly a robust multi-tiered system of support. And I think we're inching closer and closer to having that in place, certainly with some of our supplemental services. One of the things we continue to strive for is high levels of student voice and choice. We know literature tells us that when students have voice and choice, engagement improves. So we believe that'll continue to be a theme as we continue down this pathway. One area we continue to work on and have conversations about are how do we group students, how do we regroup students, what are our master schedule implications, and how can we break free from some of the traditional constraints with our master schedules. For example, at the high school setting, when a student falls behind and digs the proverbial hole, how do we throw a line down to them? In the traditional system, they don't get that line sometimes till the end of the year. Sometimes it's at semester break. What can we do with our master schedule to regroup, to throw them a line and get them regrouped into a class that's more appropriate so they don't have to sit through the entire class to the rest of the year? And that's the regrouping piece of master schedules at the secondary level is an ongoing conversation. And certainly in order to even talk about a mastery or competency-based system, there needs to be a high level of clarity and transparency for each and every measurement topic. And we believe that comes through developing learning progressions. We didn't go in depth on learning progressions, but there should be a clear and very transparent pathway towards proficiency. So for each of our measurement topics, we continue to develop, tweak, and scale up proficiency scales so students can see the pathway they need to be on to achieve mastery in any given measurement topic. This would be a good slide to stop, Marcia, and ask questions. I don't know if any are out there. I can't see
yeah.
nothing.
I don't see anything in the chat.
Mike, this is Dave Richards. Can I ask you a question about your LMS?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. We actually touch on it before the end, but
oh, okay. I can wait.
Okay.
Well, you know, I guess the challenge that we're finding is having an LMS that truly allows for competency-based, where you can roll up a collection of mastery or proficiencies to an overall competency. Does your LMS allow you to do that?
Can you maybe give me a little more info on that, Dave? I don't know if I'm following you.
Well, the challenge is, and Troy Linder's on the call as well, the challenge is that what we're having a hard time is we have it around content, skills, and concept. And so students demonstrate mastery in those three areas, but that rolls up to an overall competency that they're demonstrating mastery so they can have that competency completed. And we're having a hard time with our current LMS system on the data side that it allows for that to take place, because most of them, obviously, even with standards-based, they can do standards-based really well, but a lot of the LMSs just simply are not designed around competency-based. So I didn't know if yours is more standards or does it really allow for the competencies to be tracked and then reported?
That is a great question. I would argue ours is more standards-based, Dave. It doesn't scale in the fashion you're describing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mike, we did have a couple questions. Oh, go ahead.
I'll pull up some reports before we end here and see if that might add some clarity, though.
Okay. We did have a couple questions come into the chat before you move on. One was, do you have multi-age groupings in the elementary school?
Currently, we do not. And that's part of our ongoing conversations about just the idea of regrouping and so forth. I've been blessed in my career to have worked in multi-age environments, so I'm very familiar with that concept and structure and so forth. But our elementaries currently are more traditional in the sense that they're grade level based. But as we moved and put our system in place, it's been conversations about how do we regroup students and what would that look like in a setting unlike what we offer right now.
And one of our first steps is looking at, I can think of a good example with my own child. She's in first grade, and they do what's called math swaps. So I believe they're math swapping pretty consistently now, but essentially it's regrouping within their grade level team. And in her building, there are 4 sections, and they regroup students to their zone of proximal development. But it's not cross grade level right now. That would be, I would argue, our next step.
Okay, great. And then the other question, it's actually 2 questions, is how is the extended day and year staffed? Do you have teachers that receive stipends to stay, or is it staffed by paraprofessionals?
Great question. They're all staffed with highly qualified, certified staff members. The compensation structures in our labor agreements at an hourly rate, and we've reallocated a lot of our grant resources, and we're spending our grants essentially in a different fashion.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? So this is a graphic we recently created that we're starting to share with our community that tries to articulate kind of the core of what we're doing. Obviously surrounds competency-based ed with high levels of student voice and choice and trying to personalize learning. And on the kind of the spokes of the wheel, you'll see a lot of the things we're doing to try to personalize learning and the offerings we have with some of our programming. Just wanted to share this graphic. We would like to transition into kind of these random food for thought ideas for folks who might be thinking of engaging in this journey, in this work. And the first one's around site visits.
Yeah, so one of the, as you might imagine, one of the first, when we started having conversations with our staff, we did it through, some initial book study that we had done on a book called Delivering on the Promise. And that was a summer book study that we had done with our professional staff. And then coming back from that, that kind of encouraged lots of conversations. We did some PDs surrounding that coming back from a summer, and one of the things that came of those conversations is one of the things that it's a benefit and a detriment to the process, but we all experience the traditional K-12 system as students of the system, and so that's our paradigm. That's what our mental framework is surrounding. So having conversations about moving to the secondary changes is pretty nebulous for people. They have a hard time understanding how can this be, how is it possible? And businesses do a really good job of learning from each other, of going out and finding exemplary models and improving upon those. We don't do that so well in education, but this was one thing where we felt like it was really important for teams to go out to various districts to study what it was that they're doing as it relates to personalized instruction. So we had a team that went to RSU2 in Maine, visited a few days, spent time with staff there, spent time in classrooms, went with the challenge. All these went with the challenge of being the eyes and the ears for the rest of the district, because we came back from these site visits and presented to the staff at a meeting following the visits. I led a team to Maine. Mike led a team to Lindsay Unified School District in California, and then we had a third team go to Highland Tech in Alaska. Of course, since we've learned of the great work that's happening in Fraser, and had a team go to Fraser this year to see the things that Dr. Richards and his team are doing at Fraser. But essentially, again, the purpose of this was to go out, study what's being done, get video artifacts of that through recordings of conversations, pictorial representations of the things that we saw there, and come back and share that with the district. Because quite honestly, one thing that we learned through our work with Green Bay Schools is if we didn't have the support from our staff and moving forward, if we didn't have what they considered critical mass, 80% buy-in, this was, when you do second order change, this isn't window dressing, the latest fad kind of thing. This is significant change, and we needed staff buy-in to do it. So, and we believe this was important in the process to get that staff buy-in to help them understand. So we came back, presented. We actually formed study committees as well based on questions that they were asking. So we had study committees providing clarifications to our staff, and before we moved forward, we took our staff to a commit vote, in which we had over 80% of our staff say, we're committed to this change. We know it's going to be heavy lifting, but we know it's the right thing to do. It's that moral imperative that we have. And a lot of it came from our site visits that, again, helping the rest of the staff understand what it was that we were about to embark upon. So I highly recommend doing those kinds of things.
And I think the other value with site visits, you develop a network, and the work is too challenging and too complex to go at it alone and solo, I would argue. So a lot of the relationships we formed in these districts, continue on to these days, even though some people have transitioned to different positions. It really was the start, I would argue, of our network of support and colleagues.
So we also, I think everybody online will agree with this as well, and we want to make sure that we mentioned it. It can be something that you overlook. Don't think that we do, but it can be something that we overlook. So it's so important to think about your leadership development. Not only the leadership team, but obviously what we're going to do as an organization as new staff come in and become part of our culture. How do we make sure that they're feel like they're not always 10 steps behind and at the onset, part of the organization, the work that we're trying to do. So it's about building that proprietary knowledge within the system. Mike mentioned some of the work that we do with other organizations like the Flip-In Group. Some of the research that we draw upon, the books like the Dream Manager, he cited here, but we also have developed with Mike's leadership a leadership mentoring program within the district. So again, it's building the capacity of those who are within the organization so that as things happen, as people move, because they do, we can continue to move forward, recognizing that it is going to take individuals time to transition to the system, but having the proprietary knowledge in place is super, super important and hard to replicate if you're not able to get those things in place as you go.
Yeah, and in reference to leadership development, also it's developing that pipeline within your organization, and it really, I'll just speak to our experiences. I believe out of our last 5 leadership positions, 4 of them were filled internally, and of those, I would say a handful, if not many, were in our leadership mentoring program. So it's giving folks who have a passion for leadership and serving others opportunities to do that. So we've had good successes with our internal leadership program. LMS, circling back to this, I mentioned earlier we go live with our learning management system Empower next year. And a lot of our work to date, probably at least 18 months worth of work, has been developing measurement topics and learning targets by course, by grade level. This is just a screenshot of the front page. Gives you an idea for the layout of the program. We get a lot of questions surrounding reporting. What reporting features are within the program? Does it compute grades? Does it compute averages? How does that work? And candidly, we haven't decided on a specific transcript for next year, a report card for next year. But and there are just so many available within the system, but this is an example of a traditional transcript that would come out of Empower that you would see. So you can see in the content area, English Language Arts, it gives a breakdown of the courses the student has had, and then their score and credit. So again, this is one option where you're not going to see a letter grade. However, there are options that you can enter scales to convert to letter grades. So you would, instead of seeing 3.0, you would see, as an example, potentially a B-. And it could still even actually compute that back to a GPA. So we're still having conversations about transcripts. I will be candid in saying it's not going to be a topic that we're going to die on. We'll honor our community's input in this process because we think obviously it's important.
If I could, Mike, say one thing about Empower too, that the reason why we're working so closely with this as being our learning management system is that this was kind of developed. The platform itself was developed with Race to the Top dollars that Lindsay Unified School District in California had received, and with them being a little, obviously, much more further on their journey of competency-based education, it seemed like a great place. The framework is there, and we're just building upon it with our own, have the ability to put our own guaranteed and viable curriculum within that to provide that 360 view of where a student is in the learning continuum. So that's why we chose Empower.
This is a secondary report card example. And one thing to note here, so analyze data and information, if you can see my cursor, that would be what we call a measurement topic, and 2 standards nest under that. Again, we have the capacity to take 2.75 and convert to letter grade if that becomes an issue in the community. We also have the capacity, and I would struggle with this, but we'll see where the conversations go, to take these 2 standards grades and aggregate into 1 grade for this measurement topic, analyze data and information. So this gives an idea of, again, the reporting options for report cards, and then there's more of an aggregate report card or progress report that can be provided. This is the one that I like because it cites whether students are on pace, off pace. It gives it's an aggregate score. For our parents, we feel like this is one they could wrap their minds around as we're providing progress updates.
Mike, there was a question in the chat asking if you've considered doing badges for students.
Yeah, we've had quite a few conversations with actually Greg Dion, and even internally, we've had some considerations with our master schedule and implementing drawing a blank on what we're calling it, Jerry. An intercession period. So at secondary, we're in initial conversations, but essentially, can we have an intercession period throughout the year, potentially 2, 3, 4 times, where students who are on pace or ahead of pace could go into high interest level mini courses, if you will. Potentially, thinking out loud, one might be motor safety, one could be CPR, although that might be required anyway. The list goes on and on for these high interest courses where, again, if kids are ahead of pace or on pace, they could have an intercession period where they could earn badges. So yes, we've had conversations about that, and Greg's been pretty supportive on some of the work he's doing with badges as well.
That's one of those things. That's a great question too. That's one of the things that we would take to our students and ask for their voice in the process of whether it's something that they, something that they would, in terms of the badge part of it. something that they would receive upon completion of, because I'll tell you, the smaller circles, the smaller conversations that I've had, and maybe it's just because it's so new, the individual conversations that I've had with students, they kind of think it's hokey. It's kind of corny kind of a thing. I think they almost need to, until we get them in larger settings and have conversations. It'll be interesting to see where that all goes. I love the concept, the thought of it, though, and I think, obviously it has a lot of merit, certainly.
And Empower has the capacity to offer badges within the system, so we think we'll go somewhere with that. I'm not sure where we'll land.
One of the next food for thought is technology. We thought it was important to mention this, obviously. Technology has really opened up the doors for personalizing instruction. There's no question about that. But I think it's worth noting that Lindsay Unified, when they've been working in a competency-based system, developing a competency-based system for about 10 years now, if I'm not mistaken. And when they started, and maybe still to this day, I'm not sure, but certainly when they started on their journey, they did it without technology and did it through some other methods of helping students to know where they were in the learning continuum and so forth. So technology isn't essential, but boy, certainly it facilitates and opens up the doors to conversations to make it a whole lot easier to transition, more efficient. And quite honestly, when we came back and did from our site visits and had the conversations with our staff, one of their concerns was, even though they heard that Lindsay didn't have the technology, the one-to-one deployment to be able to do it, they still felt like this was a barrier to implementation. In other words, if you didn't have the technology at a one-to-one level, that it would hinder the process, not make it impossible, it would hinder it. So, which is certainly one of the reasons why we made it such an effort to go one-to-one, to say, we're not going to let this, if this is something that you believe is a barrier, we don't want this to be something that's going to interfere with our capacity to implement. So we have deployed one-to-one in grades 5 through 12 with Chromebooks, and this is our third year of doing it, and 1 to 2 with iPads at the elementary. So, and we have the hopes, the plans, the vision for making us a K-12 one-to-one district.
I mentioned this briefly, but we feel like the network we've developed has been essential. And just from a support point of view, as I mentioned, the work's hard, it's challenging. Things surface with master schedules, with intricacies, questions that you just can't anticipate, that we would argue need to have a network to lean on. And I cited some of the folks that have been key in our network. Certainly Reinventing Schools has been a huge partner. One of our friends, Virgil Hammonds, has transitioned to KnowledgeWorks, and we've had ongoing conversations with Virgil, who we consider to be the ultimate servant leader surrounding this work. CompetencyWorks is certainly a player in this as well. Recently we met with Andy Pridgeon from Modern Teacher, and they're doing some support surrounding competency that I believe they're helping some districts in Michigan. Greg Dion has been a great supporter at the Michigan Department of Ed of this work, and continues to be an advocate for moving forward. And obviously a few of the districts that we've recently formed some relationships with, Fraser, Hamilton, Berrien Springs, who's going to be Berrien Springs will be one of our partners with our virtual school, and obviously EdTech specialist in Marcia. But again, I think if any of you consider heading down this pathway, the network is crucial.
Along with the network, obviously, as superintendent, you need your board support through this. It is heavy lifting. The board needs to understand that it's something that's going to come with certainly some levels of resistance, because again, everybody's familiar with the traditional system, whether it was successful for them or not. They understand it. As I told people throughout our process, we're not going to have all the answers to all the questions before we move forward, because quite honestly, the system that we've all been accustomed to doesn't have all the answers for students either, and that's why we're having the conversations that we're having. So it's important to have the Board of Education support through all of it, and I'm very proud of our Board of Education and the support that they provided to us in moving forward with this. If you take a look at our strategic plan, which is on our website, I've been working through strategic planning with a few districts in my career, and all of it's great work. All of it typically involves departments putting together goals for the department and how that's going to carry out the vision of the organization. This isn't like that for our strategic plan. It is all about what we're going to do as an organization to implement the second order change that we've been talking about this morning. All the way through the plan are steps woven, helping us move forward toward this vision, and I'm very proud of our board for doing that. But obviously these conversations surround, they have implications surrounding budgets, policy. It's interesting conversations that we have at the policy level and at the administrative guideline level, if you will, or procedural level, at the building level, because we continue to uncover things within our policy, within our handbooks that are we're very accustomed to in a traditional system, but our transition challenges those notions and causes us to go back and continue to do policy development, handbook development, and so forth. And then again, the community relationships are so important in this, helping we've heard long from our business officials saying that we have to think differently about what we're doing to prepare our students, and they're a big part of our community, so bringing them on board and having conversations with them about we hear you and this is what we're doing about it has been invaluable and so important as we go through this process.
It's probably worth noting too, a question we receive quite regularly is how much money does this cost to get started? I think back to our time in Lindsay, in Lana Brown, their assistant superintendent there, flat out said, this doesn't cost more money. Do you need to think about how you're using your existing resources and think about how you might use those resources differently? Yes, but the net cost will not be an increase. You just need to be willing to think differently about how you're using your resources. And I think we've modeled that advice in moving forward. Last but not least, wanted to talk on professional development. It's an imperative part of this process. We do multi-year planning with our professional development needs, and it is driven by needs. If you think back to our high reliability schools framework, some of our learning communities will have different needs than others, and that's okay. Also, there's conversations all the time about the literature says professional learning must be ongoing and continuous. But in order to make that happen, we felt like we had to put some processes in place, one of which was classroom learning labs, which we've discussed. And we've actually woven in classroom learning labs into our evaluation process. If people are aiming to be highly effective, there's an expectation that they engage in classroom learning labs. As Jerry mentioned, professional learning communities are a part of our culture now at Kenowa Hills. And last but not least, this year is our first year with instructional coaching. Each of our learning communities has an instructional coach that supports the needs of the staff and learners in that building. We're inching up on our time here, but just one more slide.
And this was the kind of the message that we gave to our staff through the conversation about whether or not we're going to continue on our journey. What is your moral compass telling you? Really challenge them. In fact, with our high school staff, ask them to close their eyes and think about why they became an educator. What was it that drove them to this profession? And finally, what legacy do you want to leave? And we believe, at the core of all this is we all came into this for the very same reason, and certainly the system itself doesn't support what we know about students and how they learn. And although it takes an enormous amount of work, our teachers have, worked extremely hard, and this year they've worked harder than ever. I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with parents that say, man, the teachers, they're working really hard, and we all know that, we all acknowledge that. It is heavy lifting to do, but at the end of the day, it's for all the right reasons. And as with anything else, whenever you do something new, the first it will always be hard, but we know we're at the most difficult stages right now, and that's a very consistent thing that we heard through our site visits is it is a lot of work. It's very rewarding work, but from both students and from staff in particular, because I didn't have a lot of conversations with parents through the site visit that I was on, but the two groups that I mentioned said that it's a ton of work, but we wouldn't go back to the traditional system. That this is the right thing for students, and students would revolt if we tried to go back. With that, I will take any other questions you have. We want to leave you with our contact information and encourage you to reach out to us if we were of any benefit at all, or if you have any questions. We learn as much through these webinars and having conversations, and hope that you'll continue the conversations with us.
Does anyone have any questions?
I want to echo what Mike Murray just put into the chat. Thank you both. This has been absolutely fascinating. And, just listening is heavy lifting. You guys are putting a lot of time, effort, and I dare say emotional energy into all of this. So thank you. If anyone has a question, their contact information is there, or you can reach out to me or Lisa. But thank you again, Mike and Jerry. This has been fabulous. Thank you so much. It'll be on the website, knowing our web person, probably in an hour or two. So thank you very much.